Welcome to the Birth Squad, the podcast designed to empower birthing individuals with real insights from two Black female physicians. We're here to guide you through your health journey, one episode at a time. I'm Dr. Kamisha Thomas.
And I'm Dr. Ijalma Bello. We are two OBGYNs and longtime best friends, and we're here to help navigate you through the world of reproductive health.
Real women, real stories, real experts, and the facts you need to know.
Tune in every other Sunday, and don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe.
Ready to join the squad? Let's get into it. Hey, Birth Squad fam. Welcome back to season 3 of the Birth Squad.
Today, we are diving into a powerful story with our amazing guest, Realtor and entrepreneur, Shalaya Shipman.
Yes, Shalaya's story is so real and so grounded. But before we get into the juicy details, let's zoom out a bit and talk about why stories like her matter, especially for Black women.
Absolutely. If you're new here, there's a hard truth. Black women in the United States are 2 to 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. That's not about income or education. This disparity exists even among well-resourced, highly educated women.
Unfortunately, it's about racism in healthcare. It's about being dismissed, not believed, and not supported. That's why Black women are increasingly seeking out alternative birth options where they feel seen, heard, and in control.
So this is an important episode, but please be advised that this episode discusses topics which may be triggering for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
All right, let's get into it. Well, welcome back to the Birth Squad Season 3. We are so fortunate to have a good friend and soror of mine, Shalaya Shipman. Shalaya, welcome to the Birth Squad. We would love if you could just start us off by telling us who you are and share a little bit more with our listeners.
For sure. Well, hi, everyone, and good to see you both, Kamisha, Dr. Kamisha Thomas and Dr. Ijalma. We go way back to our UC Berkeley roots, so it's so exciting to reconnect in our adult years. I am originally from the Bay Area. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm now a mom, and I am also a bonus mom. So I'm entering this motherhood journey in a non-conventional way, but I feel like I have some cheat codes going into this new mommyhood. So yeah, excited to be here with you all and share a little bit about my story.
Yes. So we ask all of our interviewees the same question. What was your path to motherhood?
For someone who is very much a type A individual, I really didn't have a plan. I think as I reflect upon my years up to motherhood, I think the idea of motherhood was always an exciting one, but it was never one that I absolutely had to do. And I think that was a result of me trying to take a lot of pressure off of myself. I think as women in society, there's so much pressure of like, okay, you have to do all the fundamentals. Like you have to do well in school, you have to get a degree, you have to have a good profession. And then it's like, okay, have you found someone? Are you going to have children? How many children are you going to have? And I've always found myself in social groups where typically the people who I surround myself with are usually a little bit older than me. And so I think I had a preview of the anxiety that I could take on or the anxiety that I didn't want to take on. And I was also very fortunate to not have pressure from my parents to like, hurry up, are you going to have a baby? So there really wasn't a prescribed plan, which is so unconventional for me because I plan for everything. I got married in August of 2023. And the one thing that my husband and I did talk about is that we wanted to be married before we had a child. And not that there's anything wrong with doing a completely different path, but my husband had been previously married. He has, or at the time, had younger children. And I think we were just trying to do our best to like set an example for them. And again, if they choose an alternative path, that's fine. But we paced ourselves in that way. So yeah, that was my path. And then boom, had a baby naturally.
So tell us about that, right? How did you decide that you wanted to have a home birth over a hospital birth? Because it's a story and I just want everybody to hear.
It is a story. I think I always wanted to have a home birth, to be honest. And again, I didn't spend a whole lot of time and energy like doing research. My path to motherhood and my pregnancy is very much a spiritual, intuitive journey. I haven't read one single book on motherhood I haven't read one single book on how to raise this child of mine that I have now, although I have the books. I just have not read them. But I just knew based on, I think, life experience that I didn't feel safe in a hospital. And this is well before I knew anything about the crisis that is impacting a lot of Black women, not only as it pertains to their maternity health, but just health in general. This is just something intuitively that I don't really feel that safe in hospitals. I don't always feel safe in institutional environments. I think that has a lot to do with who I am as a Black woman. I think it has a lot to do with my ancestral DNA. Just like my spirit is just like, that doesn't feel good. And I'll be honest, my husband who works in the medical industry was like, "Oh, we're absolutely having the baby in the hospital." So that is how my relationship works with my husband. We are very much the yin and yang. And I ended up looking into, well, let me take a step back. As soon as I got pregnant, I was like, oh my God, how did this happen? Which I know is a little crazy because we know how it happens. But I think I just had a moment like, oh my goodness, I've planned for everything. And I I didn't exactly plan for this to happen at this exact time, although I knew it was inevitable. And so my husband had to like kind of snap me into reality of like, you need to book an appointment. And I'm like, oh yeah, an appointment. And so I ended up going to an OB who I was referred to by a friend. And I went and I felt like every appointment was just very routine. Just like, how are you feeling? Let's check the baby's heart rate. How are you feeling? This is what's going to happen. Here's what you shouldn't do. And here's what you should do. And any questions? None? Okay, great. Bye bye. And I was just like, okay. I mean, my whole pregnancy is just like, I hope everything is okay. Am I doing the right things? Not that I had a lot of anxiety, but I'm just kind of learning as I'm going, but I'm not learning a lot. And I want to say early in my third trimester, I reached out to Kindred Space LA. And I've known about them forever, but I just got to the point where I knew if I wanted to pivot, I had to take action to do so. And so that kind of solidified for me that I knew I wasn't going to be at a hospital once I started connecting with them and learning about what they offer. And my husband was like, well, how about a birth center? So we considered their birth center, but we happen to live very close to a hospital, like very, very close. We could walk there. Not in labor, but we could walk there. And so he said, well, I feel comfortable just having a home birth so that in the event that we have to pivot, the hospital is across the street. And so that's how we landed on a home birth.
Okay, so Shalaya mentions that she felt called to have a home birth. But what options do you have available to you?
Yes, let's break it down. In the US, there are three primary places where people can give birth. Number one, hospitals. This is the most common setting. Hospitals are equipped for emergencies, and you're more likely to be under the care of an OBGYN or a hospital based midwife. Number two, birth center. These are freestanding centers staffed by midwives. They're designed to feel more homey and are great for people with low risk pregnancies. And number three, home birth. With a licensed midwife, some people choose to birth at home for maximum comfort, control, and cultural alignment.
But let's be real, not everyone can choose one of these. For birth centers and home births, you usually need to be healthy and considered low risk. In fact, if you remember Sierra from season 1, episode 4, she talked about her midwife at the birth center and how she had clear criteria for who could be delivered there.
Right. Safety is always the top priority. But what's powerful about Shalea's story is how she turned into her intuition and made a decision that felt safe for her, emotionally, spiritually, and yes, even physically.
Yeah, so she started with an OB, but it felt transactional, like check boxes. What's the heart rate, blood pressure, see you in 4 weeks? No depth, no connection. And unfortunately, due to the pressure to meet demands from the hospital system, this is how patients can feel sometimes.
So I really love that her husband, who works in the medical field, was like, hospital all the way. But then came around when they realized, wait, we literally live across the street from a hospital. In case of an emergency, we're covered.
It was such a beautiful example of partnership, planning, and honoring instinct. And also the importance of choosing your squad.
And that's what we're all about at the Bird Squad. Sharing stories that help you build your squad so that you can feel calm, reclaim your power, and rewrite the narrative of Black birthing people. So let's hear now how Shalaya's journey towards a home birth unfolds, because it's a story, y'all. So, in addition to your husband, who was ultimately part of your birthing team? And how did you go about choosing them?
I will say that an intuitive and spiritual path led me to choosing my birth team, and I am I feel very proud and honored to know that, like, literally everyone was a Black woman. It just felt so safe. It felt very grounding. I could be very vulnerable, and I mean, Dr. Kamisha Thomas was a part of my birth team even before she was officially a part of my birth team. I have a really good friend who I actually ran track with in high school. She's a nurse midwife. Her name is Talita, and she's actually based out of Nashville, but we've been friends since we were teens. And so I, of course, was like talking to her. I think as I was experiencing my pregnancy journey, which was beautiful and like no hiccups and amazing in so many incredible ways, when I would go to the OB, I always felt like I needed to fact check. So I'd be like, Kamisha, does this sound right to you? Talita, is this right? And so really there were people who are already in my network and in my trust circle that I just tapped into them because of the expertise that they have. And I think that was also so powerful, so beautiful. And I think it's one of the biggest things that I take away from my pregnancy as a major blessing.
So kind of talk about that a little bit when you said when you go to your appointments with your OB, you felt like you had a fact check. How, when you made that decision to pivot, how did your OB respond to that? Like, what was that interaction like?
I love how you're asking this question, Kamisha, as if you don't. You're like, tell me. And I'm like, girl, you know the whole story. I mean, it was wild. Kamisha was one of the first people that I reached out to. I was a little over 36 weeks, maybe 36 in 2 days. And again, this is me navigating pregnancy and navigating the healthcare system or the side of the healthcare system that I'm not very familiar with, right? And so I go to my appointment. And what's so fascinating about this is I go to this appointment, and this is the very first time I've gone to my appointment without my husband. He went to every single appointment with me, but this particular appointment, I'm gonna bust him out. This appointment, he had to go to Hawaii for a work trip, and I was not happy about it. But he had to go. So he's out of town. I had reached out to my line sister. She was busy, and I'm like, you know what? I'm a big girl. I'll go to this appointment on my own. So I went to my appointment without my husband, which from the vantage point of the doctor's office, I mean, that's something that if I was in the doctor's office, I would have taken note of, right? I also didn't wear my wedding ring because a little bit later in my pregnancy, my rings weren't always as comfortable on my digits. And I go to my appointment. I'm doing my NST, my non stress test. This is my very first one. And again, I don't necessarily know what to expect because I haven't seen it before, I haven't experienced it, but I have talked to Kamisha about it. I have talked to Talita about it, and I've talked to some of my other friends who have recently experienced motherhood. And so the appointment goes well, and then the doctor comes in and, how's the heartbeat? Everything's great. Okay, cool. Do you have questions? And I was like, oh, no, I don't have any questions, but I do want to share with you. And I also reached out to another fellow Cal alum, Desiree Thomas, who is a labor and delivery nurse or was a former labor and delivery nurse. And so I said, hey, I'm planning to tell my OB, like, how do you think this is going to go? And she's like, it's going to be fine with this doctor. Don't worry. Like, she's totally on board with home birth. So I segue into, by the way, do you happen to know labor and delivery nurse Desiree Thomas? She's like, oh, yeah. I'm like, oh, she's a good friend of mine. I was like, I just wanted to let you know. And I said, and she told me that, this would go over well with you, that I'm planning to do a home birth. And she was like, well, you know, I understand. And it was very much like saying all the right things, but not happy with what I'm telling her. And she was like, well, there are risks associated with it. And I was like, totally understand. And she's like, but if that's what you want to do, that's fine. And she's like, at this point, I don't really think that I can see you anymore for any of your future appointments. Now, at this point in my pregnancy, I have weekly standing appointments with her because I'm taking NSTs or completing NSTs until delivery. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they've been talking to me about how important these NSTs are. And now she's just like, you're done. And so I said to her, I was like, well, is it that my insurance no longer covers this? Or like, where is the disconnect where like I just can't come to this doctor's appointment anymore? And she was like, no. She's like, it's covered. And so I was like, okay, great. Well, then can I continue to see you for my NSTs? And she's like, well, I guess we could do that. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So I end up leaving the doctor's office. And again, these upcoming NSTs tests are already scheduled until like my due date. And so I get in the car and I call Talita. And I'm like, so it was kind of awkward. Like I told her and she seemed to be supportive, but I know she's not really supportive. She then said that I wasn't able to move forward because the future NSTs weren't included in my care. I asked the question about insurance and she's like, no, it does cover it. I was like, it's just very confusing. And she was like, I really think you should follow up with her in an email to just like make sure that you have a clear path and understand as to what is next. And before I could even get home, I had a message from this doctor on the portal basically saying, I mean, it was a fairly meaty response, but the one line that I remember from it is, "You are no longer a patient under our care for this pregnancy." It's just like, wow, like you can really just drop somebody. And understandably, she knew that I had a midwifery team, but I also told her that the midwifery team did not have the tools or resources for me to continue NST tests. And yeah, I was just kind of blown. I think my next call was Kamisha. 'Cause I'm just like, shoot, what do I do? And I'll also say what I appreciate about how you handle this, Kamisha, early on, because I want to say I was early in my first trimester, I was like, I'm pregnant. And I went to this OB and I don't know if I like come to you instead. I love how you said as long as you're getting the treatment that you need and you feel like you are in a safe space with this doctor, you don't have to come to me. And I think in any other world, when it comes to profession, we always want as much business as we can get. And so I appreciate that you weren't like, no, you should just come to me. I can't believe you went to her first. You should come to me. And I think there was a part of me that was like, I should switch. But I'm like, what am I like? Why am I switching? You know, there wasn't anything in the very beginning of my pregnancy that told me this was not a safe space. In retrospect, it felt cold. Like it didn't feel like these warm appointments. When I started seeing you, I was like, oh my God, I should have been seeing you all along. This is amazing. But leading up to it, I just was like, I'm just going through the motions. And that was it. I did not respond to her message. And I think, again, for me, I was just kind of focused on like what spirit was telling me. And I really don't think at that time, and I'm glad that I listened to God on this. I don't think God wanted me to pour all this energy into negative spaces. I was so uplifted and feeling so fulfilled by having conversations with people who I trusted, who were in like birth work space. And I also noticed that as I started going to my appointments with Kindred, like I learned a lot. Like it wasn't just like, yep, we hear a heartbeat, your blood pressure is great, pee in a cup. Do you have questions? Like my appointments were complete. They were an hour. I learned a lot about my body. I learned a lot about my baby. I had questions about things that I had heard. I gave birth at 40. So some of the questions that I had, or some of the information or questions that were asked of me early on in my pregnancy at 19 weeks was like, do you want to be induced at 39 weeks because your placenta is going to basically expire on your due date? I mean, they were like really radical. I felt radical or just weren't aligned to what I think my pregnancy was going to be. And I just continued to focus on listening to God and not allowing outside distractions to pull me in an opposite direction.
You know, Ijama, what still hits me about Shalea's story is the way she was just dismissed by her OB, just dropped. And at 36 weeks, after being told how important those NSTs were, it's heartbreaking.
It really is. And what makes it worse is that she wasn't even asking her OB to disappear. She just wanted to explore a birth that aligned more with her values. But instead of supporting her in that transition, unfortunately, her OB essentially said, "You're on your own now."
And here's the thing, there are providers and practices that do what we call tandem care or shared care. That's when you're working with a midwife or planning to birth at home or a birth center, but you also have a backup OB or hospital team in place if you need to transfer. That's not uncommon. And honestly, it's smart planning.
Yes. because transfers do happen. Sometimes a birthing person wants an epidural, or there might be fetal distress when the baby's heart rate drops and doesn't respond well during labor. Or it might be something like arrestive dilation, which means your cervix stops opening, or arrestive descent, where the baby's no longer moving down the birth canal.
Exactly. These aren't failures, they're just things that happen. And when you have a care team that respects your birth plan and has a plan B, it makes a huge difference. Think back to season 1, episode 1, when Ranisha needed a transfer from a birth center to the hospital.
But unfortunately, like we saw with Shalaya, not all providers are open to this. Some OBs or their institutions refuse to do tandem care because of fear around liability.
And in Shalea's case, her OB said, I guess you can come back, and then turned around and sent a portal message saying she was no longer under her care. Unfortunately, that's just not compassionate care.
That's why choosing your birth team is so critical, not just based on credentials, but on alignment, values, communication, flexibility. You want a team that can hold your vision and hold you if your vision has to shift.
Amen to that. And shout out to Shalaya for trusting her gut and finding the right squad. Because when you're birthing, especially as a Black woman, you deserve to feel safe, supported, and seen. Now let's hear how her delivery went. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you for sharing that story because I really appreciate your vulnerability with all of that. It sounds like it was such a stressful time, especially at a critical point in your pregnancy. So I'm so glad that you did have Kamisha there for you to be able to kind of fill in that gap. I wanted to pivot a little bit to the actual delivery now. Who was there? And, you talked a little bit about being like really close to the hospital. So I also wanted to know, like, were there any concerns about safety and like what your backup plan was in case of emergency?
I don't think I had any concerns about safety, me personally. I think my husband, who works in the medical space and has seen a lot of things that I haven't, and he also has other children. Those birth experiences where 3 of his older children were all birthed via cesarean. So, in the very first one of the 3 was, like, a critical situation where it was like, "We need to do a C-section." So that's why the subsequent 2 were also C-sections, and I think for him, safety was, like, the biggest concern. For me, I was fine. I mean, I know that delivering a child is a very scary thing, and I know that it can also be very dangerous, but I was just like, "I'm gonna be fine." Like, there was nothing that I had to worry about. The plan to pivot to the hospital, I think I would have probably been more so led by the direction of my midwives, or if something intuitively felt critically wrong, the plan would be like, hop in the car and go. And it's literally a block, 2 blocks away. Okay, so this was really fascinating. I had always said leading up to a couple of things, 'cause I know if I don't say this, Kamisha's gonna be like, "Why didn't you say that?" So my due date is November 20th. There is something about the 20th that is really special to my family. There's so many people in my family who are born on the 20th of various months, including myself, my mom, my aunt, the list goes on. And so when I found out that her due date was November 20th, I was like, oh my goodness, it's going to be the 20th. And Kamisha, being a very experienced physician, is just like, that's not how it works. And I'm like, okay, girl, that's fine. But like, this baby's going to be due on the 20th. So anyway, on November 19th, my water breaks, and it breaks in a very dramatic way because I am a real estate broker. And I'm also someone who constantly has an agenda and something to do. I'm a busybody, and I love that about myself. And that particular day, I was supposed to meet a client for a showing at 9 a.m. and my water breaks. I mean, to be truthful, I think there was like some hints of water breakage earlier in the morning. And I was just like, no, no, that's not anything. At 8 a.m., however, I was like, "Oh my god," as I'm standing in the kitchen waiting for my husband to, like, pack up my breakfast, and our oldest is sitting at the table eating his breakfast. I'm like, "Oh no, guys, my water just broke." So my water broke. I'm not gonna go into all the crazy details, but I did go on that showing, and I did sell that house. And then I made it back home and I was like writing a contract. I was texting my doula, I was texting my midwives. I had called Kamisha on the way to the showing. And I think she could tell by the audio. She was like, "Where are you?" And I was like, "I'm in the car." And she's like, "Doing what?" And I'm like, "I'm going to a showing." She's like, "Shalaya." But all that to say, like, nothing eventful happened on the 19th. And again, in like the traditional world of medicine, like once your water breaks, you have 12 hours to get to the hospital. But I did not want any interventions. At this point, Dr. Kamisha is my physician. She knows that I'm not going to a hospital. And I also spoke to my good friend, nurse midwife Talita, who she was just like, "Look, just continue to check your temperature every 4 hours. Make sure you don't have a fever. Don't put anything in there that shouldn't be in there. Just don't submerge yourself in water." And my midwives were telling me the same. And it wasn't until like midnight on the 20th, look at God, where I started feeling like these cramps. And outside of pregnancy, I've never had really bad menstrual cramps, or if I had, they've been pretty tolerable. I think there's been two instances in my life that have like cramps have knocked me out. But I was just like, oh wow, I haven't had cramps in a while. That's kind of what I'm feeling. And that happened between midnight and 5 a.m. And then again, nothing. I continue to stay in communication with my midwives, my doula, also Kamisha. And at one point, Kamisha was like, "You just need to go get the salad." And so I went and got the salad in Studio City. My husband actually got it because I wasn't trying to get in the car. And so he got it. And then I started indulging in that salad, which was actually pretty tasty. And I started feeling like a little bit more like intense cramps, but like nothing was like actually happening. And I'll be honest, I was pretty frustrated because I've been in tune with my body forever, especially as an athlete. And so when I'm doing something and expecting a result, it always happens. And so I'm just like, the water has broken. Where is the baby? And that was just getting a little annoying. And I had the salad and I knew there was this, this cheat code of possibly taking castor oil, but within a 10-minute span, Kamisha and my midwives were like, "Okay, we need to do the castor oil." Because at this point, it's been about 36 hours almost since your water has broken and we need to get this baby out. And I proceeded with this castor oil smoothie, which actually was not that bad. I remember I texted Kamisha and I was like, "So do I just down it or?" And she was like, "Yep." And I downed it at 5:21 p.m. And by 5:27, I had a 2-minute contraction. And it was not what I was feeling before. Like the other things that I was feeling were like cramps. And so my midwives knew what was happening. My doula knew what was happening, but I never hit that 511, like having contractions what is it, every 5 minutes for 1 minute long, 1 minute in between. Never happened to me. I literally went after that salad and the castor oil smoothie. It was like a contraction every 4 minutes. And it hadn't quite been an hour. I did transition to the shower because I started getting like some chills. And I have a friend who recently had a baby, and she had told me that when she got in the shower, it was soothing to her body, but she noticed her contractions slowed down. And so I was being cognizant of that. I mean, I had the phone in the shower, like tracking my contractions. And my husband's like on the other side of me connecting with the doula. And I hopped out of the shower because I felt like they were slowing down. And I went into like a rapid delivery. This is 5:30 on a weekday. We live in the Valley. My doula and midwives live in LA, some as far as Inglewood. And 5:30 or so is when labor started, and she came out at 7:51 PM. So it was myself, my husband, and at this point, she's like family, but we had a photographer there to capture the birth so that we could kind of conclude our story or document our story. And I think what's crazy about all of this is that my husband did not want to do a home delivery because he wanted to make sure we had all the resources. I remember telling him in kind of like a teasing fashion early on in my pregnancy, I'm like, "You should just become a doula and just deliver the baby." And he was like, "I'm not doing that." And I'm just like, "You'd be great at it." And then lo and behold, he delivered the baby. So it was a water birth. It was a super fast delivery. Like when I look back on it, it doesn't seem like it was 2.5 hours in terms of my period of being in active labor. It seems like it was more so like 40 minutes because it just moved so quickly. Our midwife was on the phone with us to kind of guide us, but I also found even with my birth, I didn't need a whole lot of guidance because my body was doing all the work. And that was in looking back on it, it was fascinating, but it was a little scary at the time because I've seen so many movies where it's like, don't push. Or I've even been in a room where a friend was delivering and they were like, don't push yet. So as my body is like pushing, I'm like, wait, wait. My midwife is like, no, that's just your baby coming out. So if you want to have this baby, get off of the floor, because I was on all fours. She was like, get off the floor and get in the tub. And so my family friend slash photographer, Aaliyah, ran the water. She has a 4-month old and she just had a home birth. So she knew what to do. So she was like, I got the water set, I got the temperature right, and I started crowning. And Aaliyah was like, if you want to have a water birth, you need to get in by the next contraction. And then she came.
What an amazing story. I already knew it, but still, it's always amazing to hear your story and just like your whole journey through your pregnancy. And I think it's such a great story for people to hear, which is why I really wanted you to come on the podcast. And I want to ask you two questions. Number one, what did having a home birth teach you about yourself? And then number two, what advice would you give people who are curious or are planning to have a home birth for themselves?
Yeah. I think what I learned about myself is that I really have to trust my gut. I grew up in a household with just my mom and I listened to just about everything my mom said. Like she gave me great advice on everything. And I think because I have such a close relationship with my mom, and I have really amazing girlfriends too, I tend to trust my gut, but I also want to like tap my trust circle to be like, is this the right thing? And when it came to my pregnancy, I didn't feel the need to like check, like, do you guys think I should have a home birth? Should I not? Like, I just really trusted my gut and I knew that I was going to be safe. I am not a super religious person, but I'm very spiritual. And there were I mentioned my initial sentiment when I found out I was pregnant was just like, oh my God. Like I was fearful and had some anxiety, mostly because I wanted to make sure that I was doing all the right things, not only in my pregnancy, but leading up to my pregnancy, and also make sure that I don't bring a child into this world that I mess up. Like there just felt like a lot of pressure straight out the gate. And when my husband said, you need to book an appointment, and I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so when I called the OB and booked the appointment, they were like, our first available is April 9th. And I was like, oh my God. April 9th is my grandfather's birthday, who I was very, very close to. It also happens to be my crossing anniversary into Delta. And I was just like, I'm good, right? And then when I started kind of doing the math, I'm like, oh my goodness, she's going to be born in November, super close to my grandmother. She was actually the one person in my life who made it such a point to communicate how powerful and amazing it is to have children. I remember she passed away of cancer in 2009. I just remember her saying, like, the greatest gift is my children. And that was the one time where I was like, "Oh, maybe I should have one." And so knowing that she would be a November baby, I'm like maybe she'll be born close to my grandmother's birthday, which she was born 4 days before my grandmother's birthday. So I think those things within itself, I didn't have a whole lot of I didn't have a whole lot of fear. And so trusting my gut and having those signs were really helpful. The other question in terms of, we'll repeat it because I want to make sure I answer it fully.
Just what advice would you give to someone who wants to have a home birth or is thinking about having a home birth?
Yeah. I do think that pregnancy is a very spiritual journey. Even if you're not spiritual, even if you're not religious, I think that listening to your body is so important. And so, if having a home birth is something that one wants to consider, I think exploring resources and figuring out if it's best for you is so important. And I just think, regardless of what the makeup is of your pregnancy, you have to just explore the options to figure out what works for you because there's not one clear path. And I think that's the part that was also a little annoying even about delivery is like, wait, so like does my water break and then the mucus plug happens and then the contractions happen? Or like, oh no, it could be any order. Your water doesn't even have to break. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, there's like no clear, this is exactly what's going to happen. And so, because our bodies are so unique and our experiences are also very unique and personal to us, I think people just need to explore what feels right for them. I think there are, just like many things in life, there are a lot of pressures to do things this way. Like you're pregnant, you have to go to the OB, you have to do this, you have to get these additional tests done, you have to, get Pitocin or have some type of induction if you've gone beyond the 12-hour period after your water has broken. There are so many things that people feel like I have to do this in order to be safe. And I think that's what's so unfortunate about the birthing world in general is that everybody wants to deliver a healthy baby. Everybody wants to have a seemingly easy and and fearless delivery. But that's not the case for everyone. So if we try to prescribe everyone to follow a specific formula, I don't think that's the right thing to do. I just don't. So I think women need to trust their bodies um, and lead with that.
Shalaya, you've shared such great insight today. I really appreciate like your perspective and, just your insight about, especially about that part about there's no one formula, right? And, trusting yourself and then also finding people that you trust to be able to help make decisions. I just wanted to know if there's anything else that you wanted to share with our listeners and how they could connect with you if they'd like to.
Well, the last thing that I'll say before I speak to the listeners is I just want to say how proud I am of both of you. I've known both of you since we were undergrads at Berkeley. And it really is amazing to see how you guys have evolved into these professions that you absolutely love and have a lot of passion for. And not only do you love and have passion for your profession, but I also know actually being under Dr. Kamisha Thomas's care, how much you really care about your patients. It makes a world of a difference. And not everybody has that, hence my experience with the initial OB that I was with. So I just appreciate both of you for going through life with purpose and with intention to care for others. As far as the listeners, if you want to know any more about my birth story, feel free to DM me. I actually love talking about birth stories now that I've experienced it. And we've had so many mutual friends who've had babies this past year where I'm like, what's your story? Tell me your story. Oh, that happened to you. And again, it just speaks to the fact that nobody has like, there's not one duplicative or yeah, there's not one duplicative birth story. Every story is different. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I am very much an open book. And I just wish everybody well in their birth stories and their motherhood journeys.
Thank you so
Thank you. Aw.
Of
Appreciate it so much.
course.
Shalea's story reminds us that birth is not one size fits all. It's deeply personal, intuitive, and sacred. Whether you're planning a home birth, a hospital birth, or something in between, the key is being surrounded by people who honor your choices and hold your safety with compassion.
Yes. And as we saw in Shalea's journey, trusting your gut and building a team that respects you can make all the difference. We hope that this episode empowers you to ask questions, explore your options, and lean into the birth story that is meant for you.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.